Everybody, please meet Harry Deacon. Harry co-founded Cultivate Cornwall as a student when I think they're a community more renowned for other activities, so it's particularly impressive. And the vision of Cultivate Cornwall is to create sustainable communities for that work for everyone, which I think is a very inclusive and exciting proposition. And they exist to tackle poverty, give youth a voice, and also to tackle climate change. Now, I've also had the luck with my consultant hat on of working with Harry in his guise as leading Tex, which is focused on the circular economy for community benefit. And Harry does some really exciting work there, repurposing textiles into useful, surplus textiles that is, into useful materials, and working with businesses across the Southwest too. So but Harry is very adaptable. I'm always excited to speak to Harry. After COVID struck, Harry and his team pivoted from textiles to food redistribution, literally overnight, distributing about, what was it, Harry? 79,900 meals or something like that?
Yeah. Next week we'll hit 50 tons.
Yeah, which is really impressive. So enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Harry.
Thank you, Lou. So I'm obviously Harry. I'm going to speak to you today briefly about the various projects that we're running under Cultivate Cornwall. As Lou said earlier, Cultivate Cornwall was founded while I was at university with John, who founded it with himself. While at university, we were doing a business degree. We realised there was huge value in social entrepreneurship. But we didn't want to just kind of do business as usual. We rebelled against the system slightly and launched a non-profit. But from then, everything's grown from strength to strength. And we've had quite a fortunate journey through growing Cultivate Cornwall. But to give a bit more context into the projects that we do, I know Tex has already been mentioned, so I'm going to start with Tex. Tex is basically a project that looks at how we can work within a circular economy to reduce textile waste, but support communities at the same time. So essentially, there's two arms to Tex. We have the kind of community side, and then we have the business side. Tex Communities, on the community side, runs a load of different activities, and essentially it's about using textiles to support communities to grow. So we will run swishing events as one of the key things that we do regularly, obviously pre-COVID. And actually, when we were doing those events, we were in the space of 3 hours, you'd have up to 200 people would attend, swapping between them up to half a ton of clothing. For those of you that don't know what a swish is, it's essentially just a glorified clothes swap. But we found it a really good way for basically allowing people to get rid of the stuff in their wardrobe that they don't actually wear anymore. In a lot of cases have never worn, and actually swap that for something that's completely new to them, something that they will make use of, and encourage that kind of sharing economy across our local communities. So we run them pop up at all sorts of locations across Cornwall. But under the community side of Tex, we also run regular workshops and skill sharing events where we bring people from across the community together to share skills. We've found that there were a lot of people with skills within the industry, but there wasn't the employment, so a lot of those skills had just been left and ignored. But through Tex, we're able to kind of bring out those skills again and make sure that they are shared through generations. And actually, I think tapping on that why that is so important for us, we quite like the term of the sewing and the Tex activities. We call them post-apocalyptic skills, because essentially they're so necessary, but they're skills that are dying, and if there was an apocalypse, it would be really handy to be able to sew and make sure that you can recycle, repair, alter your clothing. We also do other kind of community events that I'll tap on briefly with Tex communities, one of which is a project called Bags of Hope, which kind of fits into a lot of our other projects. But essentially, out of the waste textiles, we produce bags which are then filled with dignifying things. So we have dignity bags, which are full of sanitary products and hygiene items. We have bags that are filled with clothes that go out to children going into care and things like that. And then also we have bags that are filled up with craft packs. So those craft packs again go out to kids, and particularly through this time at the moment, through the pandemic, we found that it's been a real struggle for a lot of people. We've massively moved to food, which I'll talk about in a minute. But while doing that, we noticed obviously these people are struggling to feed themselves and their families, so that there had to be something more that we could do that would support particularly the kids in these impoverished households. So craft packs have been a really good way for us for giving that little bit extra. Essentially, we've now not get kids getting excited over the fact that we're delivering them a tin of baked beans. They're getting excited over the fact that they've got a nice craft bag full of all sorts of activities to keep them entertained. And also another kind of key activity that we do under Tex, the community side of things, is the fashion shows. Last summer, we brought together a group of about 20 teenage girls, all who previously had problems and self-harm backgrounds. And actually, through the course of running 5 workshops with them, where they learned to make a different item each week, we basically then moved them on in confidence enough that by the end of it, we held a massive catwalk event that was open to the public, and they all modelled the different things that they created. But actually, I think for us, the bit that really, really showed us how much that they'd kind of grown in confidence wasn't the fact that they were able to and comfortable to get up on the catwalk with their friends. It was the fact that afterwards we gave them £100 to go out and celebrate. And actually, they decided that their celebration was to all get together, strip down to nothing but their bikinis and have a pool party. Now, that's something that's really, really huge for us, and particularly seeing how kids with self-harm backgrounds are able to kind of come together and grow in confidence so much that they feel comfortable enough to do that together. But going more into the Tex innovation side of it, Tex innovation basically is the product development side of what we do. So Lou mentioned earlier how we work with a lot of businesses. So basically there, what we do is we come together with a business that has a textile waste problem, and we work with them each on an individual basis because everyone's problem is different and everyone's solution therefore needs to be different. But to give you a taste of how that works, we work with companies that come to us from all over the country, mainly in the southwest. We try and keep it locally where we can, but we're also conscious that we're pretty much the only people at the moment that can provide the kind of solutions that we can. So location at the moment also doesn't have to be a priority. We're trying to create that demand that will then allow other people to do similar in other locations. But essentially through Tex Innovations, we run the we'll start with the business, and we'll work with them to understand what their waste problem is. Some of them it's through local manufacturing, so they have offcuts and things that are left. Some of them fashion companies and things that will have things that will return to shop that they don't want to resell, things that are damaged, things that are faulty, things that have come off the end of line as seasons have changed. So the kind of streams of waste are vast, and also end products that are returned to base. And that, I think, is why we need to work with each one individually to create those specific solutions for them, is we can actually then find a way that is actually as sustainable as possible. So essentially with Tex Innovation, we look at the surplus that's produced, and then we'll work with our product design team to create products, and then we'll use our manufacturing capacity to repurpose that surplus into another product. At the start of the first lockdown, though, a lot of this changed. We're still running Tex Innovation and Tex communities. A lot of the community activities on hold with the current lockdown at the moment. The manufacturing and Tex Innovation is still going from our Portreath site. Bodmin was our main site before for manufacturing. However, at the start of the first lockdown, we noticed there were a lot of people struggling with food poverty, particularly as people had been put on furlough. Everyone gets used to living within their means. So all of a sudden losing 20% of your income, then you've got the increase in unemployment, and all these kind of problems that are kind of all building up meant that there was a huge need for emergency food across Cornwall. And actually, Tex communities and Tex Innovation being based in Bodmin, we'd chosen that location because it was quite central. It was quite a strategic location that would give us access across Cornwall, but also access over to the border to Devon and Somerset and beyond. So we pivoted, as Lou was saying, overnight. We moved down, all of the manufacturing got relocated down to Portreath, and we freed up our Bodmin hub to create a distribution hub, which has been, it's been remarkable how much support there's been for doing it. But also it's quite staggering actually looking at where we are now, just kind of 7-8 months since we started the food. We've now distributed more food than we have repurposed textiles, and yet we've been working in textiles for quite a few years now. So yeah, it's been a really mammoth project, the food. And there's a couple of elements that I want to explore a little bit further, because I think for us it's shown us a lot. It's pointed out to us, I think, that if we do push out and reach out to the community a bit more, there's a hell of a lot more that they're willing and able to give us. Although we're from quite poor communities, and that's usually not money, they've got a lot of other things that are beneficial to us that we could use, that they're always quite willing to give. So actually, to help us get through this next lockdown and over this difficult winter, we're expecting 2 lorries, one of which is going to arrive next Thursday and one in a couple of months' time. 2 massive Great Arctic lorries filled with about 15 tons of food. So that will hopefully get the eastern half of Cornwall emergency food distribution to get us through these next few months. But really for us, what was the biggest challenge then was we're currently running it from a smallish shop. So there was no way that we would be able to accept an Arctic lorry load of 15, 18, 24 pallets. So we then had to reach out to the community. And within a day, we'd been offered a premises for the remainder of the year, an industrial unit that was basically being rented by a local vet, and they were using it for the purpose of just having a car park. So the premises wasn't really being used, but it showed us that actually just by going out there and approaching these kinds of companies and just asking questions to the community and seeing what they come back with, it opened so many more doors, and it's made things like this possible. And really, it on that line, the food, like I've said, we've just got this industrial unit that we're going to be putting the food in through the winter. We're now in a position where we're starting to look forwards a bit to the future and what's coming next. Fair Exchange and the food distribution has been a very responsive project, and in that, because of that, we haven't had as much time necessary to really step back and think about what direction are we going and what's the longer term plan for this project. And I think for me that's really important, and I quite often at the moment I haven't had time, but if I go back a few months, I quite often take a few days where I just wouldn't do anything other than just spend a bit of time thinking. And I find that really useful for kind of grounding myself and making those kind of informed thought processes and decisions as to what is going to be next for us and what direction do we need to go in. We've decided that with Fair Exchange, that direction is going to continue with food. We've just managed to secure some funding, which will get us a industrial unit from January for another 12 months. So really, this is kind of a watch this space, I guess, where the food distribution will be continuing. Although the benefit of taking on a new premises is it's going to allow us to incorporate other aspects, partially because it will make as much impact as possible, but also we're thinking along the lines of we want this to be something that's long term. So we can't just offer from the space emergency food parcels. We need to look beyond that and understand how we really can make it sustainable. So really we've found a space that will allow us to look at other aspects from including community assisted agriculture and community growing schemes, and also including space for batch cooking for us, so we can cook up ready meals and frozen meals, but also creating the kitchen facilities that will allow us to provide training and educational opportunities for the community. But I think, again, it's thinking about those various ways that you can benefit the community and bring the income in. It's for us, it's not just going to be about distributing emergency food. It's also going to be about providing these extra things for the community that can bring the extra income. I don't want to run on into too much time, so I'm just going to we'll have time for questions and answers to follow, but just briefly to speak about some of the other projects that we're involved in. We run a library of things in Bugle. I'm not going to touch on that too much because I know that another one of the key speakers is going to be talking about libraries of things. But yes, we've got experience in running a Bugle library of things. That's now expanded, and we're in the process of setting up Bobbin Library of Things, which we've done in phases. That has been essentially because of the way we've been able to access funding to make it happen. So the first phase for that has been through launching Polyrhythm. Now, Polyrhythm is a project that is essentially a scaled down miniature version of the Library of Things, because it just focuses on instruments. So all we're stocking at Polyrhythm at the moment is a range of musical instruments. At the moment, it's been brilliant because it's along the lines of learn an instrument through the lockdown kind of thing, and we're doing click and collect and delivery service. But the plan is longer term that we are going to expand from just doing music to a full-blown library of things, but with special that will specialize in music. And Bugle is also going down a similar route at the moment, where they're looking and they're choosing their area of expertise that they will specialize in. So Bugle will be taking on toys as an area of expertise, and we're also working in partnership with Upcycle Kerno, who also head up Text Portrait. And Upcycle Kerno are also going to be doing a library of things which focuses on tools and DIY kind of equipment. So yeah, we've got some experience within libraries of things, particularly a music library, as well as the one in Bugle, which is a full-blown library of things. Another project we run is called COGS. COGS is a project. COGS stands for Community Organisation Group Support. So in similar ways to CAG Devon and the kind of activities and support there that's focused on climate action, we do similar kind of support, but ours is focused more on supporting anyone that is running a community business or any kind of community organisation, a community social enterprise, charitable initiatives, or anything that's basically for the benefit of the community. We're there to kind of support them. And then I suppose the final thing that I want to touch on briefly as well is something that I've noticed that's popped up a few times in the chat. Few people have been talking about videos, and for us, everyone talks about how video is brilliant through things like social media. But actually, we found videos really good for other things, whether it's embedding videos on your website to get up your search engine optimization ranking, for getting in the press. Video has been an awesome tool. So actually, that's one of our key focuses at the moment. It is a project called Circular Cornwall. We've produced a short 6-minute episode that kind of looks at circular economies within the textiles industry in Cornwall. But longer term, we're looking at how can we produce a bigger series and more content and more videos that will kind of explore circular economies within different industries, within the community, and how we can kind of all come together and building on that to really create a circular economy that supports communities to thrive, as well as addressing some of the kind of environmental concerns that we've all got as well. I think that pretty much draws me to an end. So if you want to think about any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them when we come on to the question and answer bit later.
Well, thank you, Harry. Unsurprisingly, I think you've blown my mind again just by the sheer range of projects that you seem to get live and just the depth of projects that you get into. I think everybody's quite excited about the concept of post-apocalyptic skills, because it's particularly pertinent to the situation that we find ourselves in, where actually we're not as self-reliant as we thought we were, and that we all need to support each other in our communities and be able to share services and help each other. And I think what's really resonated for me, and I don't know about the other groups, is quite often sometimes a community initiative is started by someone who wants to do a certain something. But what is really interesting about your approach is from almost a marketing thing, that you are looking at the community need first, and what do these communities need, whether it's people suffering in terms of self-harming, or not having access to enough food, or needing to get together with each other and work together on sewing initiatives, and just so many other things. I think starting with the what the community needs is just particularly interesting. I've got probably 4 minutes before we're going to jump onto our next presentation, and I think there are lots of questions. We'll probably pick them up in the QA, but let me just pick one of them here, and it's got lots of votes. To Harry, it sounds amazing everything you're doing. So how big is the team you're working with, and how are you funding all these projects?
Okay, so the team is ever expanding really at the moment. I think we've got 14 staff at the moment, so it's a reasonably sized team. I say 14 staff, it's probably worth pointing out that only 3 of us are full-time. So everyone else is part-time, but typically ranging from like 16 to 25 hours. So there's a significant amount of kind of staff resources that goes into it. We've got a huge volunteer team as well. And we rely extremely heavily on our volunteers. So hopefully that will kind of answer that bit in brief. Then the other part of the question about how we fund it. In a lot of ways, we try and create our own income where possible. So through Tex Innovation, we're manufacturing products that make a profit that we can use to reinvest back into our services and activities. But also there's various ways we can build in income. And I think that's what's quite cool about Tex Innovation is actually we go with the magic of 3. So if you can get paid 3 times for doing the same thing, for us, that's ideal. So actually, when we're looking at kind of the Tex Innovations, we'll look at what funding can we get to do this and actually pay for expansion? Can we buy capital equipment with funding and things like that? But also then working in the other community impact side of things, and how can we do it with funding? That's usually an initial thought. But then also we can charge for the collection of the waste, because we're taking surplus from industry. We charge them, basically they'd have to pay to burn it or incinerate it or bury it in landfill. So essentially we can pass those costs on to the businesses that we're taking the surplus from. And then also we're obviously making a product from the waste that we can sell at the end. So we're trying to find as many ways of building income into a small idea as possible. But ultimately, we are still quite reliant on funding. It's a hard slog. At the moment, we've only got income secured up until April. We have obviously our own money that we're making alongside of it that will cover some of the cost. But after April, essentially, we haven't got enough money to carry on doing everything. So we're working on trying to find ways that we can support continuation funding and things like that. But essentially, I think the thing that resonates most with me when I've been speaking to people about funding in the past is, think of when you're applying for funding, think of it as a job application, or if you look at going out and looking for employment. You're not just going to submit your CV to one shop and think, right, that's it, hopefully I'll get that job and I'm all sorted, I don't need to do anything more. With funding, we treat it in much the same kind of way, as actually don't just go to one funder, go to a lot, because then the chances of getting one of them is much more increased. So we will do that. We'll produce applications that are then sent out to a few funders that we're kind of target strategically. Sometimes they come back and you'll get both of them will agree to fund you, and then you're in a really strong position where you can go back to them and kind of play off with them and say, well, we've been offered this now from both of you, so would you come together to fund slightly more? It will cost you less individually, but a combined contribution that's slightly more that will allow us to do a bigger project. But just to kind of come back to the question initially and really briefly kind of answer that in a bit more of a targeted way. Our main funder is Lottery, National Lottery Community Fund, although we have funding coming in from all sorts of streams. So DEFRA and RAP have funded the food. The Bugle Library of Things, that was set up and funded initially by a parish council. The local parish council have got a wind farm. So it was the profits from that paid for that. We've had funding from Unlimited, Power to Change, and a whole array of others. But yeah, Lottery are our main funders.
Okay. Thank you, Harry. As I say, everybody, I think it's the magic of three and various other funding streams, but actually being quite adaptable and thinking out of the box, I would say there, Harry. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Harry. That was really, really interesting. And there's an awful lot of chat and support for what you're doing. And Carol, I'm not sure where you're from, Carol, but she points out that a lot of community action stops short and stops evolving, and your way takes a dignified approach to people, which I wholeheartedly agree with. So thank you, Harry.